History often remembers the Warring States period as chaos. But that's a word spoken by those looking back from the safety of the future. For the people who lived then, it wasn't chaos. It was hunger. A hunger that wrapped itself around the land like a winter wind, pressing on the lungs, filling every thought. It shaped every decision a king made, and every breath the soldier took on the battlefield. 7 kingdoms stood under the sky, but none saw themselves as merely one among many. Each believed they were the chosen vessel of history, destined to unify the world. Teki, for example. They believed wealth was the foundation of destiny. Gold flowed like water in its markets, and scholars filled its academies. But gold only buys loyalty when the world is stable, and the world was anything but. Gold, it turned out, was too soft a weapon. Then there was Chu, who believed power was born from the land itself. Its territories stretched across the horizon, and its nobles wore their pride like a second skin. They thought they were the unyielding spirit of the South, but land is only strength when the heart of a nation is unified, and Chu was fractured, split between clans, too proud to kneel to each other. To the north, Zhao believed courage was enough. Their legendary cavalry rode through snowstorms and mountain passages, their armor polished with frost. They truly believed courage could carve fate out of stone, and for a long time, it didn't till they met something colder and harder than courage. Wei put its faith in strategy. Their engineers built fearsome new weapons, and their scholars invented new ways to calculate and fight. But strategy only wins battles when you have time to think. And the one thing their great rival, Qin, refused to give them was time. Yan, perched on the northern edge of the world, believed patience could outlast ambition. They were quiet, calculating, waiting for the other kingdoms to exhaust themselves and simply collapse into their hands. But the world didn't collapse. It, Ardenit, and Han, the smallest kingdom, believed knowledge could stand equal to power. They wrote laws, studied mathematics, and built intricate systems. But knowledge without the ability to enforce it is a weapon with no blade. In the dead of night, every one of these kingdoms held the same secret thought. If we can just endure a little longer, if we can hold a little more land, if we win just one more war, the world will be ours. But history isn't shaped by dreams. It's shaped by systems, and the system that Qin built was unlike anything the world had ever seen. In the other 6 kingdoms, a farmer could serve in the army for 30 years and die with nothing but his wounds. A noble could command armies without ever touching a sword. Talent suffocated under the dead weight of ancestry. But in Qin, the battlefield was a ladder. The blood you spilled was your resume. The rank you earned became your identity, and the state did not care who your father was. This is how you create soldiers who don't fear death, because for them, death wasn't the worst fate. The worst fate was to live and die as nothing. So, when Qin soldiers charged, they weren't fighting for their king, or their state, or even for glory. They were charging for transformation. They ran toward danger, because danger was the only door they had to a different life. And there is nothing more terrifying in war than an army of men who see their own salvation on the other side of the enemy's spears. This was the power that marched toward the 6 kingdoms, a force they couldn't comprehend, and this misunderstanding would seal their fate and lead to their ultimate collapse. Then came the moment history would never forget. Changping. The state of Zhao believed courage would save them, as it always had. Their soldiers were proud, disciplined, and fierce. But Qin sent by Qi, a general who didn't fight to defeat. He fought to erase. The battle didn't unfold with chaos. It unfolded with cold, hard calculation. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Soon, Zhao's armies realized that courage cannot stop hunger. Courage cannot replace strategy. Courage cannot change the fundamental structure of a nation. When the battle finally ended, the ground was silent. 400,000 soldiers, buried alive. Zhao would never recover. The other 6 kingdoms would never recover. The world had already shifted. They were just slow to understand it. After Changping, the world no longer believed in glory. It believed in inevitability, an inevitability that wore black armor and carried banners of deep purple. It marched without hesitation. It spoke little. It didn't promise greatness. It promised a conclusion. And a conclusion was exactly what the age required. Ying Zheng wasn't simply born into this world. He was forged by it. As a child, he was a hostage in a foreign court. He learned early that safety is an illusion, trust is a luxury, and the world only respects those who can shape it by force. When he finally returned to Qin, he wasn't a child anymore. He was a weapon, sharpened by hardship. He understood something crucial. The world was tired, not tired in body, but exhausted in spirit. The endless cycles of alliances, betrayals, invasions, and negotiations had drained every kingdom. The 6 states weren't strong rivals anymore. They were just exhausted survivors. All it took was one power that was not exhausted. Qin was that power. One by one, the kingdoms fell. Not instantly, not theatrically, but like a mountain collapsing from within slowly at first, then all at once. And then, through the smoke of a collapsing world, Ying Zheng stood before the throne of a land that had finally stopped struggling against itself. He named himself the first emperor. In his mind, this wasn't pride. It was accuracy. He wasn't just a king of a kingdom. He was the ruler of civilization itself. But conquering the world was only the beginning. The harder task was ensuring that it didn't fall apart again. The unity he had created was a unity built from worlds that had once hated each other. Languages differed. Measures differed. Roads differed. Laws conflicted. Identity clashed with identity. Without constant intervention, the empire would tear itself apart the moment the armies stopped marching. So, he didn't stop marching. He marched inward. He unified the writing system so that every child in every village learned to think in the same shapes and symbols. He believed that if people wrote the same, they would understand the same. And if they understood the same, they would belong to the same people. He unified weights and measures so that trade no longer relied on trust, but on certainty. A measure in the south meant the exact same thing as a measure in the north. A grain tax in one region held the same value in another. The empire became predictable. Predictability isn't glorious, but it is a form of peace. He unified the width of every road and the distance between every wheel rut. Carriages across the empire would lock into the same grooves. Movement became efficient. Armies could march faster. Messengers could travel farther. Trade could spread without interruption. The roads became the veins of the empire, turning it into a single, living body. He unified the law to make justice something that, in theory, didn't depend on birth or social position. The noble and the farmer were meant to be equal before the law. In practice, harsh enforcement made the empire stable. Fear did what reason could not. But this stability came at a heavy cost. To build the great walls that defended the empire, laborers were taken from their homes. To construct the vast road network, backs bent and shoulders broke beneath stone. To carve palaces, tombs, monuments, and fortresses, men worked under the sun and the lash until their breath failed them. The empire functioned, but it trembled. People obeyed not because they understood, but because the immense weight of the state pressed down upon them. There was no room to resist, no space to step aside. The empire was everywhere, and yet, even amidst the empire's overwhelming strength, Ying Zheng knew something no one else understood. He knew the empire was held together not by laws, not by soldiers, not by walls, but by him. He was the center of the bowstring, the tension that kept the entire world intact. If faltered, the bow would snap. If weakened, the empire would dissolve back into the chaos that had existed before. So, he refused to weaken. He didn't rest. He didn't soften. He didn't allow himself to be human. He tried to become a symbol, a presence, a force that could not die. He sought strange medicines, alchemy, the secrets of extending life, not because he feared his own death, but because he feared what would happen to the world when he was no longer there to hold it together. He didn't seek immortality for himself. He sought immortality for the empire. But an empire like this could not live without the tension that created it, and tension can never be eternal. When Ying Zheng died, the empire didn't collapse instantly. It collapsed in waves. Court officials fought for power. The succession was manipulated. Policies were twisted. The bowstring loosened. For the first time in decades, the world took a deep breath. And in that breath, rebellion found the space to spark. But the collapse of Qin was not the failure of its project. It was the completion of its purpose. The world it left behind was not the world it had inherited. The idea of unity remained. The memory of what was possible remained. The map that had once been splintered into dozens of warring domains now understood itself as a single body. Dynasties would rise and fall. Borders would shift. Emperors would come and go. But the idea of one land, under one sky, with one identity, endured. That idea did not exist before Qin. The Six Kingdoms didn't lose to Qin. They were abandoned by history. The world needed someone to end the age of constant war and hunger. Someone willing to become the blade. Someone willing to pay the cost that everyone else feared. Only Qin had the will. And that is why the story of Qin is not a story of victory or defeat. It is the story of inevitability. The story of a world that had cried out for an ending, and found one. The echo of that ending still lives today. In roads, in laws, in language, in identity, in the powerful belief that a land can be won. Qin did not conquer the world. Qin completed it. Thank you for joining us on this journey through history. If you found this story as fascinating as we do, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more deep dives into the past. We'll see you next time.